It's January 1983. You have recently completed flight school and will be joining your first squadron as a C-130 naval flight officer in a few months. In the meantime, you've been invited to join a sailing crew as a navigator for an open water race from Fort Lauderdale to Key West, Florida, which is a distance of about 200 miles. Your boat crew is racing a 50-foot yacht. It's well suited for open water races like this one. This looked like it was going to be a lot of fun. A nice boat, a great race, and a destination that Jimmy Buffett helped make famous. How cool was that? So, here you are on race day. The weather forecast is calling for stormy conditions and 35 to 40 mile an hour winds. But the fact was that the sustained winds were easily twice that strong. The race officials delayed the start with the hope that they would die down a little, but that didn't really happen. So, they decided to give it a shot anyway. It was really rough going from the very beginning. The winds were so strong that your crew was forced to reduce the sail area significantly to try and maintain control of the boat. You were down to using just a fraction of your mainsail, and the jib you had up was the smallest in your inventory. That didn't make things any easier. So before you even got to Miami, you made the decision as a crew to turn around and head back to Fort Lauderdale. It just didn't make any sense to be racing into the night in these conditions. It's still daylight as you approach the harbor, but what you see next does not make you feel good at all. The conditions at the mouth of the harbor were extremely violent. There were huge waves crashing everywhere, and several boats had lost steerage and were foundering on the rocks. It was not a pretty picture. Now, you, your skipper, and the rest of the crew are 100% focused on trying to bring this boat in safely. It was going to take all of you working together to make that happen. You are in the aft steering cabin with the skipper manning the backstays that were holding the mast up. Suddenly, an enormous wave rolls up and breaks right over the top of your boat. It caves in the aft cockpit where you are. The sheer force of the wave snaps the rudder post like a twig. With no ability to control the boat, it immediately goes broadside to the wave and flips upside down. Now you're underwater, and what's worse, you're hung up on something that's keeping you from getting to the surface. What was supposed to be a really fun sailing race has gone completely off the rails. And now you find yourself stuck underwater, beneath a boat that's no longer seaworthy, fighting for your life. From Navy Sports Central, I'm Carl Darden, and this is another special episode commemorating 50 years of excellence in women's athletics at the U.S. Naval Academy. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. If you listened to our last episode, I shared the fact that our featured athlete would be with us today, so you know she survived this pretty harrowing experience. Let's go ahead and introduce her, and then have her share how she managed to do that. Mary Brigden, welcome to Navy Sports Central. It is so terrific to have you with us today.
Well, it's a real privilege, Carl. Thank you for including me, and I appreciate your time.
Oh, of course. No problem. Okay, let's go ahead and get back into it by not keeping our audience in suspense any longer. I think it's fair to say that you were in a pretty tough situation when that boat flipped over. First of all, what went through your mind as you found yourself underwater, and then what happened after that?
So what I remember was just this violent boat ride of, like roller coaster ride experience. And suddenly I'm underwater, it's dark, and I'm thinking, wow, I didn't expect my training to come in handy so quickly.
That's right.
I'm like, I got to track the bubbles. I'm looking for the bubbles. I remember my dunker experience to track the bubbles, and I'm like, okay, I see the bubbles. I'm staying calm. I know what I got to do. And I'm trying to go towards the bubbles, but I couldn't free myself. I was completely trapped. Something on the boat had trapped me, and I didn't know what. And I'm thinking very calmly. And the weirdest thought, Carl, of that experience was that I got angry. Like, you reflect on all these things when you suddenly realize your life may be in danger. And this thought occurred to me that, like, gosh darn it, my roommate, Carrie, who we had been roommates all 4 years, had tragically been killed in a midair collision in the training command. And she had died the previous summer, which of course was horrible. It's still horrible. I still feel deeply about that and miss her. She was an amazing roommate, an amazing person. And but this thought goes through my head to go, gosh darn it, Carrie and I fought to stick that out together for 4 years, and it's not even 2 years since graduation, and we're both done. It was the most weird thought that I could have ever
That's
had.
wild.
But fortunately for everyone, at least for me, the boat suddenly started on this roller coaster ride after being sort of tranquil and looking at bubbles. Suddenly it became very violent again, and the boat righted itself. It turns out the mast had been stuck in the bottom and broken, and now it was over the side of the boat, and I was literally trapped in the rigging that was holding on to the mast but no longer standing upright. And then there was no more calm because the boat was doing a lot of seesaw maneuver, and I truly thought it was going to cut my head off. It was like these cables were going across, and there was another sailor that was standing in the cockpit that grabbed my ankles and just started pulling, and he pulled me free of the wreckage, and it was just such a relief. And we had lost like 8 of our crew members over the side. And he's busily throwing life jackets over the side. Why we weren't wearing our life jackets back then only points to how stupid people were back then. I can't even imagine not wearing my life jacket in that, but we didn't. And anyway, so he's throwing this over, and I was like, can you just wait a second? How about you and I put one on first before you throw them all away? Let's get one on. But you know what? I couldn't. My arm had been broken. I didn't know what was wrong with my arm, but I couldn't move it. It didn't want to be moved. So I just sort of zipped it inside my jacket and put the life jacket around me. And anyway, long story short, we eventually got rescued by a Coast Guard cutter, which towed us in because we had no ability to steer and no mast and no nothing. And they, after some time, were able to tow us in, and other boats were able to recover the people that were lost over the side. I did have to go to the hospital and get surgery on a broken arm, but it was, that was a pretty pivotal moment for sailing for me.
Jeez. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. But before we jump into your life after graduation, I did want to touch on a couple of questions that go back to when you were at the academy. And obviously, you being the class of 81, you started when women were it was the second year women were being admitted. Okay. So, and if I recall from our previous conversation, there was right around 90 or so that were accepted in that year in 77.
Yeah, I think 90 were accepted. I'm not sure we actually had 90 on I Day, somewhere between 80 and 90. I think we graduated with about 60.
Right.
Yeah.
So obviously, 2 years in, still a very new experience for many in the brigade. And if we're being honest, there are some in there that just weren't adjusting to that well. And my question is, to what degree did the culture at the academy at that time play a role in your competitive drive, or did it at all? I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, I think, a couple things mattered a lot in that experience. One, I did have a great roommate who was third generation Naval Academy. So having her as my roommate gave me a lot of context that I absolutely did not have. And I was completely lost. On the other hand, being lost and naive is sometimes good, Like I really didn't understand what all the fuss was about, and I, was like, okay, but we're going to get over this, right? Because you seem really invested in this problem, or your perception that it's a problem. And so I didn't take it too heavily, I would say. I think it became, and it was actually kind of fun. And certainly coming from a large family gave me the confidence that, I wasn't afraid of anybody. I knew I could take care of myself and would weather whatever. And I'm just going to keep my head down and keep chucking along, And the other thing that really helped is our firsties. And I think this was true of the class of 78. They had watched all of, what had happened in that first year. And they were really committed to going, hey, we're just going to treat them like plebes and it's going to be a good year. They're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. Let's just do our jobs. And it was a pretty business-like approach for a lot of it. It didn't persist the whole time, but from an introductory standpoint, I think that helped tremendously.
Right.
And I do think that there became kind of a cultural accepted bias there that sort of took hold and took years, maybe decades to get past.
Yeah.
But Carl, what struck me immediately about the Naval Academy, what motivated me to stay, my memories that I carry are about some of the outstanding people that you get exposed to, and you were in that time frame, meeting real live prisoners of war and hearing their stories, and understanding their sacrifice. It just makes your problems seem trivial. And I had never been exposed to anything like this. I'd never been around people of service. I just was an
Hmm.
ordinary Midwestern girl, coming from a small Midwestern all girls high school. I mean, I drew on my faith. I'd gone to Catholic schools. I think that helped me. I felt like some of the academy felt very spiritual to me in that calling and in that, that desire to be the best you could be. And for sure, I wanted to be the best I could be. And so I tried to focus on that. I felt a lot of freedom being a part of the sailing team. The sailing team was a little off to its side. For the sailing team, they were excited that women were there. They knew that having women on their team meant they could win more national championships, because if the women did well, the team overall did well. So there was a lot of good things in the setup for me that I think helped me a lot.
Nice, nice. Yeah. Yeah. And I can attest to the fact that who trains you as a class plays a huge role, because you guys trained our class, plebe summer. So, and that was it was a learning experience for me, but it was definitely one that I didn't have any negative feelings about.
Yeah.
I'm not sure every class can say that necessarily.
Yeah, I know it's true. It's true. I've heard that too. And I've actually, reconnected with some of the folks from 78. And they absolutely say that. They're like, are you kidding? The class of 75 was super impactful to us.
Yeah.
The class of 78 is super, and I guess I'm lucky.
Yeah. So, one more quick question as it relates to sailing in particular. And you alluded to this a little bit when we last spoke. I mean, obviously, two-time All-American. The skill sets that you have, which ones did you think really separated you from everybody else out there? And was it something that would be considered teachable or intangible, or something that's intangible that you can actually work on?
Yeah. Well, situational awareness is huge in a sailboat race. And if you think about it, you think about the angles and how it changes. If the wind changes, 5 degrees, that's a big shift. Like the whole game has changed. The whole strategy has got to shift, and a 5-degree wind shift happens all day, every day. That's like normal. And so I think, that is definitely a strength that I have. Do you remember, if you wanted to go aviation, you had to take this test called AQT-FAR. And do you remember taking that test? Did you take it, Carl?
I did take it. I don't know what my score was, but I do remember taking it.
Yeah, I think they just tell you pass, fail, as I recall. It was either you passed it or you failed it. And people really stressed out about it. And I remember taking it going, I don't quite get when the test starts. Like, this is just so obvious, And I think it was really looking at that situational awareness, because absolutely when I was flying, flying felt extremely natural to me, and being able to fly maneuvers and in formation. And of course, this all happened in the training command. We didn't do that in our mission. C-130s don't do that kind of flying.
Right.
And, but, in the training command, you absolutely did that. And I loved it. And it felt very similar in some ways. And so I do think that is a skill that any really good sailor has to have, or they will struggle. And then I also, I do like to study. The rules make a difference. It is a bit of a game of chess. And so being able to anticipate and plan for the rules and how you're going to leverage those. But for sure, I think my strength is, I'm just so competitive. I just want to win. You look in almost all sports, they'll tell you the people that are just so intense about their goal and what they want to do, by God, they're going to find a way.
Right.
I'm kind of in that camp.
Right. Okay, so when you're in flight school, and it took basically 2 years to get through that, like 18 to...
It was about 18 months for me.
Right.
But I was a little bit faster than some at that point. The average was probably closer to 2.
Right. And I know you alluded to, we talked about the story on the intro there, and that was after flight school. When were you able to get back into sailing on a little bit of more of a regular basis after you cleared flight school?
Yeah, not at all. I had a windsurfer that I actually got as my graduation present. Windsurfing was kind of new back then. None of us knew how to do it, and I taught myself how to do it in Pensacola. And I thought it was the perfect thing to have in Pensacola. And so when I was stationed at Pax River, I pulled out my windsurfer. I would, sail around on the Chesapeake Bay with that. But that was literally just for fun. It wasn't really sailing. What happened was in 1980, the end of 85, I think this was about November 85, the Olympic Committee made the decision to open up a sailing event to women. Up until then, the only way you could go to the Olympics was, first of all, only one team goes per event, and women could compete against the men to win that event. And that would be how a woman could potentially go. Well, it had only happened once, and she wasn't going to win a medal. So finally, the Olympic Committee said, look, this is crazy. You have to have a women's event so they have a fair chance to win a medal. And when they opened that up in 85, I got super excited. And I had friends that I knew were going to try for it. And the first Olympics they were in Seoul, Korea in 88.
Right.
And I petitioned to the Navy sports office in DC. And I gave them my background, my history, and said, I think I'd have a real shot at this, but I would need to have more freedom to train and practice. And they approved it. And so what that meant was that they gave me orders. I was due to rotate in the spring of 86. So I got orders right on time, and I got transferred to the Naval Academy as a leadership instructor. And in my orders, that Navy sports endorsement was provided so that my leadership chain, they would give me time off to go to a world championship or, to go to a training camp or so forth. And more than that, the Navy would give me no cost orders. So I didn't have to be on leave. They didn't pay for it, but I was earning a paycheck as a lieutenant in the Navy, and so I was way ahead of a lot of people in that category.
For sure, yeah.
And so that's what I did for the next 3 years. I trained for the Olympics. I went all over the world sailing. It was amazing. And in 1988, the Navy selected me as the Navy Athlete of the Year, which was pretty awesome. And I got to go to a cool little big celebration in DC that was quite memorable. Met Dr. J and Michael Jordan. And yeah, it was really fun, and that was cool. That was very cool.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of those races you competed in as you prepared for the Olympics. Are there any in particular that stand out in your mind?
Everyone, sometimes they blur, but everyone was unique and so important. The first one I did was the U.S. Women's Championship in Seattle. I don't think I'd even moved out of Pax River yet, and I'm just hopping in the boat, pretty cold. I'm hopping in with somebody I didn't even know, but she was a crew. She had sailed that boat before, so I wasn't having to teach her how to sail this boat. She was experienced at it. And we finished third, and that was amazing. And it was like, whoa, we're here. And so we got to go to Vancouver for the World Championship then, which was the same time as the World's Fair that was in Vancouver. And there we got eighth, which we were pretty disappointed in, but in hindsight was still really good, given our level of preparation and the time that we'd had together. And then in the fall, I just doubled down. I put a training plan together with my crew, and we, made a schedule for the next 2 years about what regattas we were going to go to. I mean, Carl, we sailed so one that was kind of cool, we sailed the World Championship in Israel, in Haifa. And one of the things that was cool about that regatta is they're like, okay, there's two courses, course Alpha and course Bravo. And it's very important that you look at the notice board before you go out to race, because the other course we will be actively bombing. We're at war right now. And we're like, okay, let's not miss that notice.
Right.
Let's make sure we're going to that. And yeah, that was crazy. But, in Germany, in Japan, in Greece, and, as much as I'm sorry that I didn't get the chance to go to the Olympics and to be the one that won a gold medal, as our U.S. colleagues did, the team that did win our Olympics won the gold medal, which was amazing. The journey of competing at that level and traveling the world was just such a gift. And I always have felt that way. And I do think it's why my son is doing it now, because it's such a great experience. The friendships that you make across the globe, and it's a dream come true, and you get so good. You train so hard and you get so much better at such a different level than you've ever been at. And
Wow.
it's pretty cool.
That is neat. That is very, very cool. Okay, so you got winged in 83, which means your commitment was up in 88. How long did you end up staying on active duty?
Yeah. So after the Olympics was over, I had a little less than a year left in my orders. And so I was due for another duty station. I was obligated to go to another duty station. I hadn't yet finished off my flight obligation. And there were a few different possibilities. Ultimately, I ended up going to the Naval Air Pacific, Air Pac in San Diego, which is how I came to be in San Diego. And I worked a very interesting job, called the Flying Hour Program Manager. And this job builds out the models that allocates the money for all the flight hours for all the squadrons.
Oh, wow. Okay.
As well as all the accompanying maintenance dollars and parts dollars to the stations and the aircraft carriers that are supporting those aircraft. And so you really get this big picture of the deployment schedule, the op tempo, the training level. When accidents were happening, you were adjusting this because you had to make sure that the air crews were safe. And I even had to create these exhibits that got presented to Congress when the ultimate budget got put together. So it was about $1.5 billion that I was managing at that point. And I was working with computers. I'd gotten my master's actually while I was stationed at the Academy. They had this night school program from GW, which was super cool. And I had gotten it in information systems. And this was right when computers were coming out. We were all learning how to work a PC and what is an apple? What is a mouse? That was my life back then. And I had this job where I was like the queen of Lotus 1, 2, 3, and I was downloading, data. I had a mainframe dedicated to what I was doing, and all these messages would come in daily from all the squadrons on, this is how many flight hours, this is how many gallons of fuel, this is how much we paid. And I was manipulating and managing that and learning so much about data and making, and, so I stayed on active duty until the end of that tour. So I was almost 11 years on active duty before I got out.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But that was a fantastic job. You know what else happened in that job, Carl, is that the very first port of call by the Russian Navy happened, and we hosted it.
Oh, no kidding.
I mean, you talk about having a weird experience and surreal to be standing at 32nd Naval Station in your service dress whites, saluting 3 Russian ships that are coming off with the Blue Angels flying overhead, and just an array of pomp and circumstance like you've never seen. I got to meet the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Colin Powell, and his wife, and the Secretary of Defense. And I mean, it was amazing to have the opportunity to be there in that moment in history.
Man.
Totally lucky.
That's really impressive.
No rhyme or reason why that happened to me, but it was a cool experience.
Right. Oh, man. So you're 11 years in, you decide to go and make the move to the civilian world. Kind of map out the path from there in terms of where you went professionally, and then what kind of position sailing had in your life at that point.
Yeah. So when I moved to San Diego, I'd been dating a guy who had owned a sail loft in Annapolis, like a sails for sailboat loft. And he was a sailmaker. And he followed me to San Diego. We got married. So now I'm married to a sailmaker. Sailmakers don't make a lot of money, Carl. Let me just say that. They do it because they love it, and they do love it. And they are amazing what they learn about design and, but engineering. But when I got out, it was, I knew I needed to get a job. I worked for a government contractor. But that foundation of the computers is really what set my course and trajectory into into that sort of work. Not too long after that, Oracle actually recruited me because I was doing so much with Oracle for Navy contracts in maintenance systems. And, that just sort of set me off in a whole new direction with technology, which was a huge gift. So I just rode that wave from 91 to today with technology. I spent almost 10 years at Oracle, 9 years at Oracle.
Okay.
And then started doing startups and then got bought by other big companies and just, it was a real privilege to be a part of that world such an early time. Now all the young people are doing this. And I'm like, yeah, I got to do this a long time ago. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And of course, being in San Diego, that's just like prime sailing territory there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I was doing some sailing. My husband was doing a lot of sailing. And in fact, the fact that he was a sailmaker actually impacted my sailing kind of negatively because, we started having children and it's like, okay, we can't both be off sailing.
That's right. Yeah.
Someone's got to be home. But I didn't mind because I really loved being a mother. I really loved being home with my babies and growing them and having them turn into little sailors. And so I have done competitive sailing as a wife and mother, but not at that same level. And the world was a little different then. There were less opportunities for women. I did actually get a tryout for the Women's America's Cup, if you remember that. There was an America's Cup that was sailed with a women's crew. And I got to train with them for a couple of weeks. But ultimately, I didn't get the pick for that, which was certainly disappointing for me personally. But in the big picture, it was just fine. Yeah.
So you mentioned your children. At what point did you kind of start exposing them to sailing, and did all of them take to it? You mentioned a son who's really into it, but did all of them take to it, or did some say, you know what, it's kind of like with my daughter when she tried skiing for the first time. She says, I'm glad I tried it, but it's not for me.
Yeah, it's a great question. I have two sons. They're about 18 months apart. They're pretty close together. Sailing's really our lifestyle sport. Sort of like tennis, we belong to a yacht club. We socialize with other sailors. Even when I was in the Navy and I would go to new ports of call, how you'd go to the O Club and just sort of see who you would always seem to run into somebody at the O Club that you knew, no matter where the heck you were in the world. Well, I would often go to a yacht club wherever that city was too. And the same would be true. I would see people, if I didn't know them directly, we knew of each other somehow. And so it truly was a lifestyle sport to me, much the way the Navy is part of your life. And also San Diego being such a Navy town, those worlds are very conflated. Mm-hmm. At the yacht club, it's very supportive of the military. We have tons of naval officers in there in the yacht club, and so that world was really tight. And for our kids, it's just a natural thing. They start by sailing with us sometimes in regattas and races, and then other times, they don't actually sail their own boats till they're about 6 or 7. But they were in the junior program. Their friends were in the junior program. It was their life. They definitely didn't always love it. And in fact, it was important to Chris and I that they love it. And this is where parents often don't know how to handle that. And but the instructors were amazing. They would tell us to get lost so that our kids didn't feel the parental pressure, which totally took us aback. What do you mean you're telling us to get lost? We know how to talk to you. and then, but then they were like, hey, Nevin or Patrick, you don't have to go sit. Just hang out on the deck with us. They were very wise that if they created community and a sense of belonging, that the kids would eventually all start sailing and having fun and not be afraid of it. Because generally they're afraid of it. It's scary, especially if it's windy. And so it totally worked. That friendship, that community is what got them all into it. And they raced, and San Diego being such an amazing place for sailing and such an amazing climate, they all raced in high school on high school sailing teams that they won the high school nationals multiple times.
Nice.
So they were way ahead of the level that I was by the time they went to college. They had traveled, and in some cases, world championships. That I took one of my sons to Japan for a world championship that he finished third in. And my other son, Patrick, went to a world championship in Poland. They really had some amazing experiences, even as young people. And both got recruited for sailing. Nevin sailed for Georgetown on their sailing team and won national championships there. And Patrick went to the Naval Academy and was an All-American at the Naval Academy sailing there. So yeah, so I'm pretty blessed.
What year did he graduate?
He graduated in 2017.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So fairly recently.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, well, maybe certainly because of Patrick, but even before that, I was wondering how close were you able to maintain that connection to the Navy sailing program? And the reason I'm asking is because I wanted you to compare the level of support, and it could be monetary or take some other form as well over the years. How does that support for Navy sailing compare then to now?
Well, when we were there, Carl, the sail training program was not such a big thing. You remember, now, the midshipmen literally, go to sea on sailboats and race competitively, and they may never have sailed before. It's part of their naval education. So that really started to become a bigger thing when I was back there as an instructor in the late 80s. Early 90s, and it's only gotten bigger over time. So that's different for sure. There's a lot more mids getting heavily into that. At our time, it was more like a more select group was able to race some of the boats that have been donated to the Naval Academy, and they would plan events. And I did get to sail some of those. So honestly, the support's pretty amazing. So I'll give you an example. I met the Commodore of the New York Yacht Club, who himself had won the America's Cup. This is Bus Mosbecker, very famous sailor. He won the America's Cup back in the early 60s. I don't know if it was 60 or 63. 60, I think. Anyway, meeting somebody from the New York Yacht Club who's there to support the Naval Academy sailing program, and that's what he was there to give support, was amazing. And a lot of people don't realize this. Some of the premier sailing organizations like the New York Yacht Club feel a great, and the San Diego Yacht Club feel a great affinity to the naval service. And they make special trophies for it. They have military appreciation events, and it's a big part of it. They're very overlapping. It's also true in the British Navy as well, and two big sailing countries.
Nice.
And the town of Annapolis was super supportive. I knew and met a lot of top and Annapolitan sailors and sailors from the Annapolis Yacht Club and other clubs, and they were extremely supportive both then and now, I would say, of the midshipmen.
Okay, this looks like a pretty good spot to take a breather. We'll be right back to continue our conversation with Mary Brigden, so please stick around. I'm Carl Darden, and you're listening to Navy Sports Central. I did want to mention one more thing before we get into this next segment. If you're enjoying this series commemorating 50 years of excellence in women's athletics at the Naval Academy, be sure to follow Navy Sports Central wherever you get your podcasts. Now, let's go ahead and get back to it. So, Mary, I wanted to get into a discussion on what we're seeing in the present day where sailing is concerned. And I'm thinking back to a conversation we had on the phone when you're talking to me about, what do they call it? Was it GLP or is it?
Sail GP.
Sail GP. Yes. And coincidentally, the very next day, they had a race on TV, and I was watching it, and I'm going, holy.
It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah. It's totally crazy. It's like modeled after the Formula One. And the races are so quick, Carl. And the reason for that is because they require a lot of helicopter coverage to get all that coverage. And the helicopters have limited fuel capacity. So for them to successfully cover a race, they need to do it and then take a break, go back. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. So for our listeners, I was wondering if you could just briefly describe a typical race. I mean, the course is, to your point, it's not very long because they got to start and finish quickly. But they use, talk about, the types of sailboats that they use and what you're likely to see in a race like that. Do they wear body armor like they did in the America's Cup these days?
They do. I mean, the America's Cup is this was sort of taking a derivative from some of the innovations that have happened with the America's Cup and turning it into a more routine, like repeatable race model where they
Mm-hmm.
could do this. And much like Formula One, countries and companies buy a boat, buy a syndicate, and the races move from location to location around the world. There's a ship container for each one that they load up this ship, it goes to the next place, and they are racing at speeds in excess of 90 kilometers an hour. So whatever,
Mm-hmm.
it's all in kilometers, so I'm not that
Right,
fast
right.
on my transitions, but I mean, it's scary. Yeah, they could kill each other. And they had a crash just last month, and it was just like a steering failure. I think I'm not really sure what caused it, but they were racing at speeds like that, and because they lost steerage, they literally T-boned another boat, and both boats were just blown up. And one guy
Wow.
had to get airlifted off, but the rest of the crew was okay, which was super fortunate. But yeah, they're wearing helmets, they're wearing protective gear, they have emergency gear should they go in the water, to keep them, if they're knocked out, to get them air.
Mm-hmm.
They've got knives to cut themselves free, much like my boat. I mean, yeah, bad things could happen fast in that scenario, but it's super exciting and very interesting. And how
Yeah.
you can see like the boundaries and and the wind on the water and everything. So that technology is the same or similar. It's a more advanced technology than the technology that you see when you're watching a football game and you can see the first down line. You see, okay,
Right.
this is where I need to get to. And of course, you can't see that if you're at the game, but you can see it on the television. So same
Right.
concept applies. That technology was developed by a sailor. His name is Stan Honey. So he did the touchdown line. He did the hockey track chaser, and all of that. That's technology that he built. And now they're finally using it in the sailing world, which is super cool.
Yeah. And the boats those were catamarans that they were sailing, or are there different types of boats that can sail?
Yeah, no, it's one type of boat, and it's dual foils with a catamaran. They're foiling. You can see them. They need to be on their foils to be competitive. If it's in the water, they're not going anywhere. And it's only, I think it's only 5 people, maybe 6.
Okay.
It's very few people, and they're flying across these boats at high speeds, which, yeah, that's very exciting to watch that happen, isn't it? When they're like turning and the people are like, whoa,
Wow. All right. So just a couple more questions here, Mary, to kind of wrap things up. But when we had our last conversation, you talked about how central sailing has been to your life. Okay. How a lot of decisions you made, sailing played a role in it for sure. So I was wondering if you could expand on that a little bit. What did it bring out in you that made you so passionate about it, and that you carried it forward to your kids, and you're still involved to a degree even now?
Yeah, I think it's like any athlete, the feeling that you could master it, that you could be the best at it, is so enticing. Especially when you're a young person, you're like, really? I could really just keep trying harder and get better and be better than anybody. Like, that would be amazing. And, so for sure, that was the beginning. And then as I grew older in the sport, it really was the lifestyle that I liked. I liked the other sailors that I met, that opportunity to travel the world. I love to travel. I love that about being in the Navy. I love the, being able to meet different people, and usually, and what's kind of cool, Carl, there's the racing sailors that, are like me, that they're all like, let's just go analyze every aspect of this race and what we could do different and how we could be better and what we need to do next. And I love that, totally into that. But then there's also the lifestyle side of it. Like, let's just go cruising. Let's just go take our boat and sail to Catalina and be on the beach and be in the sun. I mean, gosh, how lucky am I? How lucky is any sailor that, and now that my husband and I are not working full time, we're making plans to go further, do more things like that. And hopefully the kids will join us, but, maybe not. They're busy. We'll see. There were sacrifices for sure. You don't get to have everything. None of us do. But for me, the trade offs were always so easy to go this way. I just know I'm not going to be disappointed. So if I can't have these other things, that's okay.
Right.
I'm keeping on this path.
Right. So one last question for you, Mary. When I think about the last 50 years in women's athletics, I kind of break it up by decade almost, right? And I look at those first 10 years of graduates. So let's talk like 1980 to 1989. I kind of put all the women athletes in that 10-year period and classify them as basically pioneers, because they were responsible for getting women's athletics at Navy on a positive trajectory and a really strong trajectory that clearly is evident to this day. I mean, I can name half a dozen teams, including the sailing teams, that are just doing wonderfully and are really the jewel of the Patriot League in terms of conference play. Whether it's basketball, swimming and diving, lacrosse, soccer, rowing, or track and field, and I could go on. Anyway, when you think about that, I just wanted to know, as we celebrate this huge milestone at 50 years, how do you see your legacy? How do you see your role in all of this?
Well, that's such a great question, because I'm in the midst of that, thinking through that, Carl. And one thing that I figured out kind of from the Alumni Association, like when we won those first national championships, I mean, we obviously were focused on winning, but we didn't think much beyond that. And about 10 years ago, someone from the Alumni Association sent me a note saying, we just want to recognize and congratulate you and your team because you won the first national championship won by women at the Naval Academy. And I called up my teammates and they're like, really? Like, we never knew that. We never even thought about it, like it never occurred to us. And so I thought about that. And I thought, you know what? Let me look up all the national championship teams that Navy Sailing has had. And there's 6 of them. Most of them in the 80s, actually, but
right.
Also some in the 90s and one in early 2000. And I said, okay, I want to recognize those teams. And I didn't know a lot of the women that sailed on the later teams. And so we're pulling together and organizing a table at the gala at the 50 years to recognize and celebrate those women and go, you should all be celebrated. Like, this is awesome. And I did an outreach to the Naval Academy dinghy sailors, the NADs, we've always called ourselves. And I did an outreach to the classic NAVs, we call them, which is the older generation, us old fuddy-duddies. And said, hey, are you guys interested in helping to support this celebration? And man, their hands went up. Like, we are in. Either we're going to be there or we can't be there, but we will contribute to underwriting that gala table and go get them. Let's celebrate this. So right. I think that is going to be fun. We never even thought to do it before, And so I'm excited to celebrate with women NADs over the years that I haven't even met yet. Some of them I knew for sure, but some I didn't. And so that's one thing. The next thing, though, that's quite happening and important is that we have to replace the Robert Crown Sailing Center. And if you go back in our story, that building, that physical building and that facility just blew me away when I was a high school senior and made me rethink my entire life plan of what I was doing and was truly an icon in early days of college sailing. It was the first college to have such a professional venue, such a well thought out venue. And now most of the top colleges have a pretty cool, in many cases surpassing what we have at Navy now, which is natural. And we have to redo that building with water levels going up with global warming, right. And as part of that whole seawall reconstruction. And so I look ahead and say, I want to help be part of replacing that building. I want to be helping to raise the money and to make sure women have a place in that building right from the beginning. They've always had a place there, but right. This is part of you. You have a future here. So that's what's been occupying my mind. Like, we haven't started raising money for that building yet, but I definitely want to be a part of helping make that happen.
Yeah. All right. And I think that's a good place to wrap up this conversation. Mary, I got to tell you, obviously 2 months ago, we didn't know each other, but I've had so much fun, doing these last 2 episodes with you.
Oh, so kind. You're so kind, Carl. You're amazing. I can't believe the selflessness that you are bringing to this table. It's impressive. So thank you for that.
Well, it's just all part of being a sports junkie, I guess. But listen, it's been my privilege working with you on this, and I will be out there in Annapolis next month as well. So again, thank you for being with us on Navy Sports Central, and I'll see you in April.
Thank you, Carl.
All right, take care. Okay, that was Mary Brigden from the class of 81. She was Navy's first All-American woman athlete in any sport at the Academy, clearly one of the many trailblazers in women's athletics as they began to make their presence felt during those early years. This has been our 4th in a series of episodes marking 50 years of excellence in women's athletics at the U.S. Naval Academy. Please join us next month as we showcase another great Navy Athletics Hall of Famer. By the way, if you like what you've heard on this show, please be sure to follow Navy Sports Central wherever you get your podcasts, and by all means, feel free to share it with every Navy sports fan you know. The music for this episode was provided by Nathaniel Wolkstein from Fiverr, as well as Audio Jungle. These are 2 terrific sources for finding music for just about any kind of project while supporting those who create it. And finally, the content and opinions shared on Navy Sports Central are my own and in no way represent the views of the Naval Academy or Navy Athletics. Talk to you soon, everybody. And until next time, this is Carl Darden. Go Navy, beat Army.